All right, well, let's get into it. My name is Dustin Musser. I've said that before, but I'm going to say it again. Um, I actually didn't start using Reason when I first started producing. I used this program back in 2002 called Acid Pro, which was kind of like this loop maker. It was just very basic, just making loops. And then I moved on to Cubase, which at the time I just hated, and then onto Reason 2. And Reason 2 and Reason 7 are very different right now because you can have like audio, which is like a huge deal. Producing like in Reason 4, I don't think you had audio, so I think that came in Reason 5. And also this whole mixer. Can you see? Yeah, we can see it. Oh, this is Dylan.
Hey guys, my name's Dylan, and let's see. For you guys that don't know, we're in the group K Theory, and we're here to drop some knowledge on you from experience. We're like thing grassroots, and pretty much.
We actually met here.
Yeah, we met here. Our first session was ever here. We met on Facebook. First production session here at Pyramind. We had manipulated Greg to let us use it for free, and then he caught on real quick, so we had to go somewhere else. But now we've just been working together for almost 3 years now, and just came here to share with you guys a bunch of stuff on the industry and music production, and just we've got to give from our knowledge. So yeah, we're gonna get started. We're just gonna show you a little video. We just performed at Red Rocks this summer, and we wanted to share that with you guys so you guys could kind of see what we do. We have a third member in our group, but he's not here because we have some deadlines, so he's finishing his recordings. But yeah, we're doing a new live project with our music too, so we're going to share that with you real quick, and then we'll get started on some production stuff.
I got too excited. I wanted to move forward.
Do it.
It's Red Rocks.
This is a global dance festival in Colorado, yeah, at Red Rocks.
There it is.
You always bringing me trouble, and you always be the same. You always bringing me trouble. You ain't never changed. You always bringing me trouble, and you always be the same. You always bringing me trouble.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just realized when we were sitting here that it's actually October now. So 3 years ago, we had our session here together for the first time with no project or anything. And we got to play Red Rocks this year, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff. So this kind of stuff is tangible if you really work hard. And I wanted to start that off by saying that. And this whole class is not about reason. It doesn't matter what program you use. We're just teaching the principles that apply across the board. So whatever program, DAW, whatever you use, it doesn't matter. Like, this stuff's universal, and as long as you know how to work it, you'll be able to get whatever you want out of it. So yeah, we'll start with that. And Dustin's going to take over for some production stuff, setting up your DAW, all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah.
So first, I'm gonna just go over like some basic stuff that I like to do when I'm producing, and then after that, I'm gonna open up a track and like kind of go through how I did it. It's the Serial Killer K Theory remix, which is just came out a day ago. I gotta take a look at my notes though. Okay, I think templates is really important when you're producing music. Like it doesn't matter like what program it is, but like a template could really speed up the production process a lot, because say like you open up Ableton or Logic and you just have a blank like session there, it can, for me, it can be really daunting, and then you spend all this time like setting up everything, and then by then like maybe you lost the idea, and it just can be like kind of annoying and make you mad and frustrated and then hate producing.
I think another big thing about that is like every time you open a session, if you don't have a template, you're wasting probably hours, depending how fast you are. And you're going to see how like developed and involved ours is. So that's just going to allow you to get in there and like really be able to just get creative, get your ideas out there, and get started. Because having those things set up, you're already ready to go and just get your ideas on the sessions.
Okay. This is the current template that I actually haven't started using yet, but you'll see the template I'm using right now when I go through the Serial Killer track. This is a new one I just made for Reason 7, utilizing the SSL console, which is pretty sick.
And all this stuff you can do in all your like Logic or Ableton. We just mentored a guy a couple weeks ago, and he was using Ableton, and we set up a whole new session for him, and he said it's been working wonders on there. So I think the same kind of workflow is going to apply to it, the same kind of effect processing and chaining your stuff together, and knowing where to put what there. And obviously the SSL mixer is incredible. It has its own built-in compressor, and all the effects, the auxiliaries are way more streamlined for Reason users. But the same kind of principles. It looks kind of similar to the Logic mixer to me a little bit. But yeah.
So now looking at this, I know it looks pretty insane. You're like, wow, that's a daunting craziness, but it's actually not that crazy. What I have going on here is in this mixer is I've organized tracks into sort of categories, like groups. Everything's bus mixed, and I was able to color code. I'm pretty sure in Ableton and in Logic you can color code too. I really like color coding. I think that's really important to stay organized. So I'm just going to show you what I did for my template. Is I have a section called like fills, just like drum fills, and just like a couple audio tracks to put audio on them, and then they're all feeding into this master out, which just goes into this main mixer. You don't really need an extra master out channel. I just do that just because it just makes me feel comfortable. And then the next group it's pretty obvious, like the drums, and I'll get into more details how the drums work, but it's just a bunch of drum tracks. How all has its color. They're all feeding into an aux, and then bass lines, melodies, pads, samples, effects, and vocals. And that's pretty much can be almost any type of sound that I use. And I think it's really important to do this sort of grouping of your tracks.
Why is that important, Dustin? What do you think that enables the producer to be able to achieve?
For one thing, organization, but another thing is you can like do multiple processing on like a single group. So like you can EQ the entire like vocal tracks. If you have like a bunch of vocals and you want them all to sort of sound the same, you can like EQ them all by EQing like the bus that it's being mixed in. Same thing with like drums. You want to like compress your drums to give them like a tighter glue. That's another like important thing. I think compression and EQ is like really good on like group tracks. I'm going to show you how I set this up. So what is cool about Reason 7 is I don't think you were able to do this in like earlier versions, is the rack is like double stacked. It used to just be like this one thing right now, but now you can have things over here. And what I have is I have like all the effects of Reason being fed into this master section. And that just means I could just have different effects on any of the channels. So like this is just your sends right here. And the effects, see how this says verb sidechain? It's this effect going into, oh my God, it looks so crazy right now. There we go. It's going into this effect send. And they're all labeled based off of what you have your label on the devices. And if you wanted to use it, you just turn this thing on and use this send level. This whole template took like kind of like a really long time to put together, but now that I have it saved, I can like always use it and don't have to worry about it. And it's designed based on like my personal tastes and preferences for making music. Like I really like to use the redrum, but some people may not want to use the redrum or use whatever they want. I think it's really important to like figure out how you like to produce and sort of build a template around it so that you can get your ideas out there faster. And this like might change. Like I'm constantly updating and like redesigning, rethinking how I want to do things just to speed up the process. I think that's like super important for producing is just figuring out a way how you produce, like really liking how you work and how you manage your workflow. That's super important for me.
I think another good thing about organization and getting your workflow down is that when you're doing collaborations, we'll get in the studio a lot of times with other producers, and they'll have no clue what sounds where, and miscolored or mislabeled or not labeled at all, and it just creates a really good professional workflow. So if you guys want to work with other artists, you know exactly where your stuff's at, and you're able on it, because it shows really that you care about your craft if you're going to take the time to go in there and label everything and bus mix, because you're going in and doing the extra 10% that's going to take your tracks to the next level and allow you to hear things in the mix that maybe you weren't hearing before, or isolate different stuff. And so it might seem tedious at first, but once it's all set up, you're in there. And I mean, how many of you guys use a template already? So about half. How many of you don't produce and are just DJs? Okay, good to know. So you guys should all go home and make templates after this. And like, if you have any questions about templates, you guys can always hit us up, email us, or hit us up on Facebook, and we're willing to help out with all that stuff. Might take a little bit, but we'll get back to you, and we'll make sure we can give you any advice you have, or if you have any questions right now.
Can you show how you routed the individual drums in that redrum into the?
I was actually just about to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Another great thing about Reason, when you say routing, is that it's very tangible. It's very analog feel. So it has, when you flip it off to the other side, you're going to get the cables, and you're going to see everything like it would be routed in an analog studio. So maybe some of you more experienced producers who have worked with analog gear, Reason's a great fit, because for me, I like being able to see it. Sometimes I get into Ableton or Logic, and I'm like, where is this? I can't tangibly see it there. So for this is really hands-on, and they're talking about making it 3D. So the rack's going to spin. It's going to be even cooler. We're actually sponsored by Reason. We're not trying to sell it or anything. We're just stoked. So, but yeah, great to get your workflow down. And anybody who doesn't have one should definitely do that tonight when they get back, or tomorrow. Question?
I was just curious if your templates vary sometimes depending on genre, or if they all fit the basic guideline, same basic guideline.
Yes, they vary. I'll go over that after I talk about how to route the drums.
Right here in the second row, Brent. Yeah. Question? Oh, yeah. Forgot we're doing that.
As far as busing goes, I mean, do you guys try to keep it pretty limited on the processing that you use on different bus groups? Like, I mean, like for my buses, I've got like a shit ton of stuff on it. I've got, EQ compressor, I've got sausage fattener on some of it. I've got like, I don't know, like saturators and whatnot. You guys try to keep it pretty limited and do it on individual tracks, the type of things you like to do,
Well,
like the extra
I think
processing?
it really depends on like what's happening. For Yeah.
I was going to say, just because if you have the auxiliary channels, you can assign it to any track you want.
Yeah.
So different bus routings have their different mixers in it. The melodic mixer may have like we might do a separate line mixer and do like a reverb on the melodics, and maybe some, a fattener or widener or whatever, or delay. And it just depends on different sounds are going to have different kind of things they need. Vocals are going to need maybe like an auto tune or, whatever you might want, reverb or EQ or stereo imaging, like anything you might want to add to those different things. Each thing's going to have it. We're going to go through our session, so you're going to see like kind of what effects apply to what part of the bus mix. But
on this current template, I have like a reverb that's set up to sidechain. I have a small reverb, a ping pong delay, this thing called Lush, and this third-party plugin called Fatuator that just adds a widening. And you can see them all right here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 6, 7, 8 are blank. I can apply this to like anything, including like the main bus mixer. So
yeah, also what's great about bus mixing is if you ever have a professional mixing engineer mix your tracks, they're going to want it to be bus mixed. Otherwise, you're going to pay a lot more money. So having them grouped into like, drum channels or, vocal channels and melodies and pads and bass lines, you're going to make it way easier for yourself. Your rendering process is going to be way quicker. And yeah, we work with engineers too, and for some tracks or some vocal stuff, and they really appreciate it. So having that just make it easier for that too.
there's one guy over there.
Yeah, I haven't used Reason since Reason 3, so I guess this current version does accept the live input. You can bring microphones in.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Another question I have is about all your master outs on all those different groups. Are those all identical?
The master outs.
Yeah, and when you showed the front,
You're talking about this view.
yeah, all the things called master out. Are those all the same thing, or are they?
If you're referring to like this brown thing right here, where it says master out,
yeah.
that just is showing like where this output is going, and they're all going into master out. Like this one.
Well, what happens if you lower it?
You would get
You
a lower
lower
mix.
everything?
You would get a lower mix on the pads. It's a bus mix. So
It's a
basically,
bus mix.
it's a group.
It's
It's
not
a group,
the main
yeah.
out.
No, it's not
I
the main out,
gotcha.
but
Okay.
that's the level of signal that you're sending to the main out.
I
So your
gotcha.
final
Okay.
mix.
I got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
All the groups are going to the master out, and like for example, this channel is going to pad, this channel is going to pad, and this is the pad thing that it's going to, and then this is going to master out, which is all the way over here.
And you're gonna have relative volumes for each channel that are gonna create your final volume for your bus mix. So that's why if you look at the bus mixes, this isn't an actual session, so it's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, it's gonna fluctuate for every track.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go through how I did the drums, the drum mix. So this thing right here is actually not really native to Reason. It's a third-party plugin called like Remark. I think it was free. I got it just because it's cool to like have a separation, so I know like what's going on. Like this is just separating the fills tracks and the drum tracks, and I personally think it's cool. So this right here is like a mix like channel, and it just sends, there's no cable. It's kind of like the only magic cable in Reason, and just goes to this master selector. And it correlates with these tracks. And so I have the redrum set up. So all these things, these mix channels are feeding into like this bus channel. And I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'm going to flip this over. All these are going into like these mixes, and I have them labeled kick, snare, side snare, hat. And this is just based off of like personally what I like to use on the redrum. It could be anything. But for the kick, it's a little bit different. If you see, I have them especially routed in here because I like the sidechain things. That's part of your template. Like I know I'm going to sidechain like pretty much all the time I kick to something. And I also know that I'm going to EQ it, and I also know I'm going to compress it. I have the EQ setting flat, the compressor just its version of flat, because I don't want to go too hard on like templating. I want some, because every kicks are different, but it's good to go as far as you can. Or maybe like your workflow might be different, but for me personally, this is what I like to do.
I think also the separation allows you more capabilities with your sounds, because we've done some tracks with the people and they have their Logic. They'll be dropping in samples like a kick and the snare on the same track, and like simple things like that that are just like amateur mistakes that are gonna allow you to not have as much control over your mix and get the most good compression on your kick and snare individually, especially if you're doing breakbeat or other kind of stuff. You need to sidechain your snare too. So separation of your sounds is really key.
So this mix channel like will automatically go to where I tell it to, and I can just tell it to. I'm telling it to go to the drum mix, which is its bus group. So I don't have to like wire it anywhere. What does need to be wired is this input, and I have it right there. So that's how I did that. And to create one of these channels, you just go into like utilities, create mix channel, and where is it? Oh, it's right here. And see, it's just called mix channel. It's default to the master output, but I could have it go to drum mix, and then, come on, bro. I'm not really good with the trackpad. I use a mouse a lot, so this is kind of. And then I would just have it go in there, and then I would be like, okay, well I want it to be green, all the way at the bottom. Track color, Kelly. What's up, Kelly? And then I would just name it like whatever I want. Kick.
Do you have a mouse at all,
No, I got it.
Mike? All right, thanks.
Mouse would be nice. So yeah, that's pretty much how you would do it. But there's a really cool thing on these channels called parallel, which is like the exact same like output, but I can send it to other places. So I have these spider audio mergers and splitters in here, and what that pretty much does is it's kind of like paralleling, but like on a grander level. And I'm using this for sidechaining because I want to sidechain the kick to all my other groups because I think that sounds really cool. So I'm gonna be sending the kick to like the melodic bus, the bass bus, and all like every bus except for maybe the vocal bus. Sometimes the vocal bus, and that way, like instead of just sidechaining to like every single track, which could just be kind of annoying. You can just sidechain to like your melodic group, and so all your melodies are getting sidechained by your kick, and they all have like the same sounding sidechain. It's a very concise, glued sound. That's like how you get that sound when you hear like tracks that just sound like they're really glued, tightly mixed together with a sidechain. It's probably because they have a melodic group that's being bus mixed, and the kick is just sidechaining that instead of all the individual tracks. And I'll show you how I did that in here. So I just took this parallel, I put it in this section of the Spider Audio merger, and all these outs are going to, for example, the bass. I have two sidechains things, kick side and snare side, because I think it's really important to sidechain your snare. Well, I do like a lot of breaks. This might not be as applicable to like house music, but in like breaks, your snare should be sidechaining things too, because the snare is a huge sound, and I want like my snare to be heard.
And just to be clear, breaks can be anything between dubstep, breakbeat, tempo, glitch hop, hip hop, anything that's not 4 to the floor. So it's just kind of an umbrella term. But yeah.
The Reason compressor has a output called sidechain, or not an output, an input called sidechain in, and see how this is coming from there, the parallel splitter. Oh, we got a mouse. Thanks, man. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, it's like night and day. So, yes. Okay, say I want to sidechain the kick to something. So, I'm just going to, like, delete this just to show you how, like, it's done. And other compressors and, like, pretty much can all do this. Like, Logic, Ableton, probably all have, like, a sidechain. So, I went in here. I created the Spider Audio merger. I don't have to do this. I could just go directly to the parallel, but I want to be able to do multiple instances of sidechain. So I put it right here, and it just makes a bunch of parallel channels. And then I would just feed it into the sidechain. and then I can control how much I have. I have a default set to 0 because it's going to be different each time.
Do you want to explain sidechaining as well, just so you know it's not an umbrella term?
Sidechaining. Sidechaining is a very specific compression technique which involves taking an audio source and using that to decide how much level to take out of another audio source. For example, say you have a kick sending audio and it's sidechaining to your bass line. What that would do is every time the kick hits, the compressor would detect that and turn down the volume of the bass. So you would get kind of like a swooping, like a pumping sound. So like when there's kick, the bass is quiet, and when the kick goes away, the bass is there. And you can use the attack setting, the release setting to determine how long it takes this kick to swoop down or swoop up. So you get like a boom, boom. And you hear that a lot in like dance music. It's probably like the most famous sound in dance music, and you hear it all the time.
Now, is there a correct setting for your compressor for a kick and a snare that you should always go by, or are you playing it by ear? Like, what are you doing?
I don't think there's a correct setting because it really depends on like what you're trying to do. Compressors are really hard to like teach because they're so honestly, compressors are just weird. Like you really just gotta like play around and figure out like how they work, and just honestly, you just gotta spend the hours learning how to use compressors. Um, I've been producing for about 10 years, and I feel like just a couple weeks ago, I finally like grasped like truly like how to compress things correctly. It's it's a very like long process, but it's really worth it. And you don't have to like have 10 years of experience to like use a compressor perfectly. Like um, just part of like getting in there, playing around, and learning how to do things. You'll come up with like your own style, and that's like how you kind of develop your own sound. So I have my compressors just set to like blank because it's going to be who knows what's going to happen when I produce a track. I think it's important to have a little bit of freedom in your templates, but enough stuff so that you're not just like wasting time doing like, oh, what do I do? I think someone asked a question about like, do I have different templates for different styles? And the answer to that is yes, I do. So that one I was showing you is a new one that because I want to take advantage of the SSL like mixer. I have another one for breaks, which is the one I have Reason set up for because I'm the most used to it right now. Honestly, like this new workflow I did, I'm not entirely used to. I'm just sort of learning it right now because I think it's going to make my mixes better. But I'm sticking with this one, and that's another thing I want to say is I feel like audio fidelity is really important, but something I personally believe is more important is workflow and being able to like freely produce and be creative without any sort of obstacles. So yes, the mixer before the SSL that I'm going to show you is technically weaker, but because I've been using it for so long, it's a very strong workflow for me. This is pretty much the same thing that you saw before, but it's using this mixer, which old school Reason users are probably familiar with. And this template is the main one I use right now. Breaks. The reason why it's called breaks is because every compressor sidechaining thing, there's one for the kick and there's one for the snare.
And why is that for breakbeat?
The snare and breakbeat, which could be like hip hop, dubstep, drum and bass, anything where like it's not just one kick drum on every quarter note, like house, trance, and yeah. The snare is really important in like dubstep, anything with like a snare in it, because I almost feel like you're dancing to the snare kind of. And to get like a big, powerful snare, like a Skrillex snare or a Cohen sound snare, it's kind of like impossible to like it to be big if like everything else is big. So you want to sidechain like have your snare sidechain the bass line. So when the snare hits, the bass gets out of the way. When the snare hits, your melodies get out of the way. When the snare hits, hell, your vocal gets out of the way. If you the bigger your snare you want it to be, just do that instead of like trying to make it super big because you want it to stand out.
Now, do you find yourself when you're producing using a reference point to start your mix off? And like, how do you start off your production? Are you using a certain dB to find where you want to start out with your kick mix and your bass mix, or what are you doing?
Um, this right here is Reason's. Reason's metering isn't as perfect or cool as like other DAWs, but this is the metering I use for when I'm making like a kick snare mix. And what I do is I'll get a kick. I'll show you how this happens. I use like MIDI for like kicks, but you can use audio. So I go in here, find a sample.
Oh yeah, we also make our own sample packs. It's really cool to do that for yourself. Finding samples you like to work with, drums, snares, even pre-compressing them a little bit so you don't have to do as much work when you get into the session, or making loops for creative stuff. So if you get a melody when you're working in the studio, you're like, oh, this is not right for the track, but you save it. You save it and you save that audio or that MIDI or whatever, and you put it in a sample pack and you start to categorize things that will make your production quicker. Like all these sounds we know are going to work well for whatever sample pack this is, if this is the volume 1 or
this is the break sample.
Yeah, so all these kicks are going to work well for breakbeat. We already know that. It's predetermined. We're not there sifting through thousands of samples from Vengeance. Like, these are ones that are tried and true that work for us and our sound. And it creates a uniform sound for your production. So we use a lot of sound effects that we use in all of our tracks. And if you listen to our music, you'll notice them coming in and being there. So it's kind of like our tag, our watermark, our own sound on the production, which we'll go more to later.
So what I like to do, and I've been sort of sliding the scale sometimes, is I like to have my kick sit at about negative 12 dB. Right now it's not, so let's get it there. And I might like boost the sweep to find a good low end spot. Maybe boost it a bit. And the way I compress kicks is I'll just like turn up the ratio to 2 and then slowly pull down the threshold till I see some gain reduction, and then play with the attack and release and just like find a nice sound. It can be really finicky, but I feel like when you're using compressors, really small movements are better than giant movements. And then I'm getting about 4 dB of compression, so I'll like turn this up by 4. And where are we at right now? We're at 12. And so that's kind of like my reference point of like how loud things are going to be individually. Like some together, they'll be louder, but usually the kick is probably like the most powerful sound. And then I'll get like a snare. I like that one. And I'll probably mix my snare about the same level, maybe a little quieter. Just so you know, these are all routed. These EQs and compressors, like in the other template I showed, are all routed to this drum mixer. So this channel goes to number 2. We have these things again going to the side chains. It's side chaining to everything, all the melodic group, the sample group, and the vocal group, and the pads group. And then its final output is this mixer, which then goes into this combinator, which then goes into this main mixer. And for like a sound like this, I might like boost around. Just a little bit of a boost, not too much. Like around 200. Do the same technique, move this to about 2.
And why are you boosting around 200?
200 is a really good, it's just a good spot for snares, because someone told me like a while ago that 200 is a good spot to boost for snares, and when I tried it, I felt it, and I was like, oh wow, this is for me. And I find that it just works well with like hard-hitting snares. because the kick is like lower, and you kind of want the kick and the snare to play with each other. This is like in breaks type of music. So the kick is hitting lower, the snare is hitting a little bit higher, but still low enough to like punch you in the gut. So I got about 4 dB of compression, then I'm gonna boost it a bit, about 4. I like doing really small, like tight stuff on kicks and snares. And then we're hitting about a little bit louder than 12. So I'm gonna go down to this mixer and pull it down a bit.
And maybe some of you guys like to use multiple snares. If you're gonna use a reference point for your mix, make sure that your snare mix is the same volume or like kind of close to the kick mix so that you still have that balance. So if you layer 2 snares over each other, it's not hitting like at 6 dB, it's still hitting at 12. So
oh yeah, because the multiple snares will sum together. And I think what's good for like if you want a really big snare to have like a main snare and then like a snare sort of like a top snare to kind of give it the extra warmth, extra everything. I'm gonna do that right now. This is a good top snare. But there's like a lot of stuff in here, so I'm gonna EQ a bit of it out.
And why are you gonna EQ it out?
Because, like you said, I still want the snare to be hitting around 12 dB, and if I both like play them together, they're going a little bit hotter than that, and that's gonna kind of mess up the mix. With this snare, it's so loud right now. When I apply like the master compressor to the drum channel, it's gonna not sound that great because the snare is gonna be a lot louder than the kick, and it's just gonna have a peculiar sound that doesn't sound like that good when everything is loud. So the way to fix this is I'm gonna solo it. I like to isolate channels because it makes it easier to work. I already have this set up, my template, so this is going directly into the channel we're working with. And as you can see, like if I didn't have a template, I'd have to like do this whole thing while I was making a track, and it would maybe take me like 40 minutes just to get this kick snare right. And that's where I think a lot of like green and new producers kind of like go wrong, so to say, is they're not really starting with like good sounds and good like mix method, and so they'll get stoked on. I mean, I did the same thing too. I'm not saying that like this is just like bad. Like we all do this. We gotta learn. When you don't start with like a good like starting point, like the kick and the snare, for example, or anything, it can kind of like ruin your whole like mix going down forward, because like this snare being so loud, I'll think that's like how loud the snare is, and then I'll mix my melody to that, and it's just like a domino effect of bad mix. And when you want to go correct it, it's just a mess.
So do you continuously mix as you go throughout the whole track? Are you always mixing and EQing and processing as you go, or what's your strategy?
My strategy is just to make sure everything is like on point before I move on. Like right now, these snares summed together are too loud. So I'd want to figure out how to get them to be like, at the same level as the kick. Because like if I moved on right now, the mix would just not be as clean. It might sound good, but not good enough. And so the way I'm going to fix that is go over here, take out some low end, take out where I boosted right here, which is about maybe even more. I might just take out a bunch. Let's mute this so we can hear what's up. It's still kind of loud, so I might just turn this down a lot. And now you may not be hearing there's still enough of a difference right now, just turning it down. Sometimes things don't need to be that loud. Oh, we're almost there. Down a little bit. And you'd be wondering, why does this matter? Even a small difference, I think, in mixing could make a big difference. Because if you listen to this, Just a little extra 2% made the snare a little bit fatter.
And I think just to make this clear, this is a really dance music focused production class right now, and so the drums are like your heart and soul of your track. Without good drums, it's going to sound like crap. And there's so much competition out there right now. You have to have tight drums. And after drums, usually we'll start to work on a bass line, get a nice groove going, add some melodies and some samples in there. Depending if you're songwriting and you already have an idea to build around, then that's great. You're ahead of the game. But if before you move on, you really want to have a tight drum mix. And I guess it's kind of like eager, like, oh, you want to get that hook in there, you want to get that sick bass or that drop or whatever. But if you don't have that, you don't have anything. If your drum mix isn't tight, you're not going to be able to be competitive on the dance floor, and people are just going to think your tracks are weak. So
this right now is like electro breaks, but if I slow it down, now it's glitch hop. So like kick and snare is like any type of break, like I was saying. I want to go over another template, like a houseier template, to show you how everything's sidechained differently. Specifically with like big room house, or what I call big room house. So this is pretty much the exact same thing, except the kick doesn't have a sidechain going anywhere. And that's because in a lot of like the big room house music, there's no bass line, so to say. The bass is coming from the kick. And if you use that source to sidechain everything, like the kicks are so long, it's kind of just it's really just not gonna work. You're gonna have too much sidechaining. So I have this like hidden little redrum here with like a sound that's just going all the time, running. Or I could, if I wanted to, assign this to track and just like have it go by itself. I just personally like this. In Ableton, you could just have it be like a ghost kick with like audio. Logic, I think you could do the same thing. But and right here it's muted. The point for this is just a sound that's sidechaining, but you don't hear it because it's muted. You don't want to hear it. It's just like a ghost kick. What it sounds like is this. It's just a short kick to generate sidechain information, so I can have like a really big kick, like.
And you'll still be able to get your sidechain information in the breakdown. If you ever notice people, they might have a bass line or a respace in the background breakdown of their track, and they still have sidechain information because they have a ghost kick going. So it's pretty good to have in there for this kind of music.
Like this kick right here is like a really long bassy kick. And like I would use this kick to sort of like generate the bass line and the kick at the same time. And like a lot of those big like festival tracks, you just like hear the kick just boom, boom, boom. And I would mix it so that it would be the bass line and the kick, and I wouldn't have to worry about it sidechaining incorrectly because I have a ghost kick set up. Here's the sidechain. Oh, sorry, I thought I had set up right. Okay, well, when it works, what happens is that that ghost kick sidechains the compressor the same way that you had like your kick sidechain. Honestly, I actually think that's probably a better idea because you have more control. Using like a ghost kick to sidechain things is just more freedom to do anything, and you could just have like you said, if you want like that sort of pumping sound during a breakdown where there's no kick, you can use like a ghost kick. Is there any questions right now? I just want to make sure everyone's like kind of like following. Oh yeah, what's up?
Yeah, so I was wondering, I know some people who use templates also kind of stub out basic arrangements to kind of start off with and help them just lay something out and then start chopping apart. I was wondering if you guys have done that or done that in the past.
I mean, we've like taken years to study arrangement, and looking at other producers' tracks really is a good way to do that. You study how they're doing it, when they're bringing in effects, how they're transitioning from grooves. When we open our next session here, we're going to show you that we actually block out all of our arrangement. So sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll block out the whole arrangement and I'll send it to Dustin and be like, this is kind of a skeleton of what we're trying to do here. And then that allows you to sort of see that. But it kind of can get a little overwhelming too, because you then start focusing on parts of the track where you're not at yet. And so it kind of depends. The remix might start like that, where you have parts, you're chopping it up and you're then reworking that and creating grooves, or you're starting linear from the bottom up from your first groove and your drum loop and building it upon like that. It just kind of depends where you got your ideas, really, you know, where you have to get started. You can always do that, but I really recommend studying other people's arrangements and like breaking it down. You can take it into Logic, drop it in there, and chop it up by everything and start labeling it, just to like quiz yourself on where you're at in the track, and like notating where people are putting in like transitional effects, so you get a differentiation of groove, so your track doesn't feel stale, or noticing when people bring things in and out, drum loops or melodies or vocals or whatever, and how they're doing that to be able to create mood changes in the tracks.
Also, Reason has this thing called blocks. If this is on and this button right here is on, you can go like this. You can draw in blocks. And if you can see right here, I already have all the blocks labeled. I'm going to press B. When you press B, you go into like this block mode. There, I don't actually use like the way this block mode, the way Reason intended it. It's kind of like a way of like making a loop within a loop and like moving around. I kind of just use it to like label everything. And I have like sort of some pre-labels right here, like groove A1, groove A2, bridge, breakdown 1, build up, verse. And this was all like pre-done, and I put into my template and saved it, because so I can, when I'm making grooves, I can just like have grooves already. Like I'll maybe do a 16-bar intro. I can take this arrow right here, choose, like it goes into the groove A1, and kind of just sort of build an arrangement like that. I think Logic, and I'm not quite sure if Ableton does, I'm sure they have something similar to that, like markers. And I think that's a great idea to, like, for me personally, just so you just know where you are, because it's really easy to get lost with like all this. Like you saw me kind of getting lost already. Like organization is like key, because like if you want big tracks, you probably want a lot of tracks, and you don't want to get lost, because then it kind of makes you frustrated. And almost the psychology of producing is like important.
Very much like to thank Pyramind for hosting me here once again. I think this institution is really cool, and until I came here for the first time, I had never seen anything like it in my whole life.
What I think really separates us from other people who teach is that we are outrageously passionate about what we do, and especially in electronic music.
Since coming to Pyramind, I've discovered electronic music, and San Francisco being a mecca for underground electronic music opened up so many doors for me and kind of blew my mind.
We cover everything from absinthe to contact. When people get to the mind-melting level, we get into modular synthesis.
Everything about native instruments, everything about Logic synths down to the finest detail. We learned it all.
The fundamentals of understanding how things work, that's just essential. But then beyond that, there's so much more, and that's where it gets into just a lot of the artistic side of like the creative approach of why you do something, not just how.
There's a lot of schools that just, they focus on the technicality of recording music, but I wanted something that would foster creativity and really help me develop as an artist as well.
Each of our genre-specific programs comes in 4 levels. There's a basic, an advanced, a professional, and then a master's level. And the master's level is, of course, everything we do. It's the largest and most powerful programs that we can create for you.